Howdy everybody. If you're a dedicated and studious disciple of my channel, you've probably noticed that I very rarely bring up the rating system of Geometry Dash in my videos at all. I don't bring up what ratings levels received when I review them, and I never give my opinion if any particular rating is deserved to me. In fact, I think the last time I brought up the rating system must have been in that 2.2 video when the new legendary and mythic ratings were revealed. Seriously, politics comes up more often in my videos than the rating system does. See? There it is again. Anyway, for as frequent as discussions about the rating system can get in this community, this choice of basically pretending the rating system doesn't exist wasn't out of any disdain for it on my part, necessarily. It's just that I find it difficult to put any sort of stake in it. Like, why should I care about what rating a level receives? No, really, why? Maybe I should care. After all, levels that receive high ratings get a lot of publicity. They enjoy the warmth of the spotlight as the community gathers around to play the next big sensation. Surely that's important, right? And it's true, it is important, at least in the sense that it warrants analysis. Higher ratings mean higher status and greater popularity. When you see a purple flame around a level's icon, it sets certain expectations for what it will be like. And it's for that exact reason why the rating system is not very useful to me. In fact, I tend to be more skeptical of the levels that earn the highest ratings. It's worth remembering that the rating system comes down to the arbitrary tastes of but one man, and his whims are ultimately the arbiter of what levels get what rating, if they get one at all. That's not something I can relate to, so I just end up ignoring it. I tried considering this habit of mine with a more critical eye as of late though, and the more I thought about it, the more I felt that the rating system negatively affects our community and the game itself. Admittedly, the rating system is a little more complicated than just one guy making all the decisions, so this might be a good opportunity to get into a brief refresher of how the rating system actually works, before we go into a more in-depth analysis of the problems it causes. The rating system exists to solve a very specific problem that has been present since the inception of the game, and that is quality control. How are you going to filter and present the best user-created levels in a reliable way? You can't just present the player with the recent tab and expect them to figure it out from there. That's not palatable at all. I know some people yearn for the 100 Mario challenge, but that does not account for the average person. There needs to be a system in place that highlights the best levels for the convenience of the player. There's two main ways I can think of to solve this problem. The first is with a rudimentary algorithm. Basically, taking the amount of downloads and likes a level has versus how old it is, and assigning the level a score based on those parameters. The level's score determines its rank on the featured page. The older a level becomes, the more its score gets reduced until it's eventually removed out of circulation. This is a very hands-off approach and might result in some unwanted outliers slipping through the cracks, but you can still combine this system with some good old-fashioned manual moderation as needed. I'm sure he considered this possibility, but then there's the approach RobTop actually went with, which is doing everything manually. Manually playing every level, manually deciding if they're good enough to feature, and manually deciding where exactly it's placed on the featured page too. This is such an insane decision that on some level I can't help but respect it, especially back in the day. The man has a vision for his game and is sticking by it. It may have even been the right choice considering the limited player base at the beginning. And it's not like it doesn't have any upsides. This approach ostensibly doesn't take the popularity of levels into account, so lesser-known creators can easily be given a chance to shine by putting them in the spotlight. And manually handpicking every level himself guarantees that every rated level has RobTop's personal endorsement, although this can be a double-edged sword if he gets careless with it. Of course, over the years, the rating system has expanded from being a one-man show to a whole team of moderators, but RobTop still remains the central authority figure. How it works now is that moderators will use their status to look for levels to send to RobTop, giving him a more curated list to go through for his convenience. Moderators can make suggestions on what ratings they'd like to see, and community expectations may also have some influence, but RobTop is the one making the final decisions at the end of the day. This is already a problem though, because the sheer scale of the player base now is incomparable to back when the game first released. There's a massive flood of levels uploaded to the servers players every day. And while moderators do act as a helpful filter for this, the fact that the whole system funnels through one person does make it very unwieldy. Lots of levels get overlooked. RobTop is famously slow at rating extreme demons in particular, and there's no chance he's remotely as diligent about playing levels himself as he used to be. Sometimes it really seems like he's just winging it. The system is highly subjective, yes, but that's actually not my problem with it. In fact, it's quite the opposite. I occasionally hear people complain about ratings being inaccurate, but what that means in practice is that the rating just doesn't match their own opinion of what the rating should be. Even in a purely democratic scenario, the whims of the masses are still entirely subjective. In my view, the problem isn't that the rating system isn't objective, it's that it has this veneer of objectivity in the first place. After all, I'm pretty sure I'm the outlier here. I think most people in this community put much more stake in the rating system than I do, and that's because they see the value it represents. Levels with high ratings are prestigious, they garner a lot of attention and often are at the center of community discussion. Seeing a level you like receive a high rating is exciting, and conversely, seeing a level you like receive a rating you think is too low is disappointing, because you feel the creator isn't getting due recognition. With all this fanfare and the different ranks and the pretty colors and particles, it's really made to feel like the system is measuring something and rewarding creators in kind. There's a whole team of mods working tirelessly to find and send levels. The developer of the game himself hands down the verdict on every single one, and there's even some guidelines for you to follow if you want a greater chance of having your levels rated. The system feels authoritative and structured, which gives the impression that the results it produces should be fair and balanced, but rarely does the community agree that it is. This is why arguments are so quick to break out over whether or not a level is rate-worthy, or if the rating it got is the one it deserved. This is an issue that has only worsened over the years, and I think that's because the rating system isn't humble enough. It's not humble enough to admit that it's a glorified quality control check. It has to put on this ostentatious display to convince you of its legitimacy, making a spectacle out of every single time a legendary or mythic rating is handed out to make you believe that they mean anything beyond the fact that one guy in Sweden thought it was a really cool level. And it's not like I'm inherently against RobTop expressing his opinions in this way, but the reality of the situation is that it causes problems. Not a day goes by where people don't incessantly and pointlessly argue about the rating system, of course, but there are more pernicious issues that stem from this as well. For one, I think the rating system puts way too much undue focus and legitimacy on RobTop's personal opinions. I believe this in principle, but there's also the fact that I don't really value RobTop's input that much. His vision for the game and his tastes in levels are something I deeply disagree with. You can tell by the levels he gives the highest ratings to that all the talk of Geometry Dash being more than just a video game went completely to his head, and people are eager to play into that for reasons I can only theorize about. Either way, RobTop's opinions have immense influence over the creating landscape, elevating the kinds of levels he personally likes to see, while levels that are more of a dissenting nature tend to get lost in the void. Not many levels with a more classic approach tend to get mythic, after all. Regardless of RobTop's individual tastes, though, I don't think any one person should hold this much sway over the creating scene because it stifles creative diversity. I know that RobTop does make some effort to represent a wide variety of levels, but the fact that all the decision-making ultimately filters through one person casts a dark shadow over the whole system. After all, RobTop is only human, and so his biases are impossible to extricate, as long as he is the sole arbiter. Whether or not a level is rate-worthy is dependent on his whims and the rules he set for the community. This is also why discussions about what is or isn't rate-worthy in general kind of rub me the wrong way, because it always feels like there's this underlying implication that that's something that can be objectively measured. As an outside observer, it always feels like people are tripping over themselves to conform to RobTop's beauty standards, sticking to a few rigid criteria instead of actually discussing how they feel about the level in their heart of hearts. It's like their opinions first need to be filtered through the rating system to give it this air of being unbiased, but what it actually results in is a way of criticizing levels that feels artificial and difficult to relate to. This kind of criticism isn't good at helping creators realize their vision or become better artists, because it prioritizes conformity over expression. I've made a whole video about level criticism and the pitfalls people often fall into, and I definitely feel like the rating system plays into those problems. This isn't something only mods do, by the way. People all over this community are prone to this style of criticism, conforming to the rate system before forming their own opinions and framing their criticism through it. Now, you might want to tell me that at the end of the day, none of this really matters, because ultimately it's RobTop's game. And doesn't that give him the right to use the rating system however he sees fit? I find this reductive. I can understand why to some people this sounds like a reasonable enough argument without thinking about it too much, but you have to realize that all it accomplishes is shut down conversations and render productive discussion completely impossible. I don't want to hear that RobTop can do whatever he wants, because that doesn't address anything I've said. It's a completely vapid point to make, and yet it's shockingly common all over the community in all manner of different contexts. Like, it's the same thing as the whole controversy surrounding the mods updating creators' levels against their will because they broke after their 2.2 update. People will argue with a straight face that creators have no say in what happens to their own levels just because RobTop says he can do whatever he wants. And they legitimately think that's a good enough reason. Oftentimes, it's posted as a single screenshot with no further elaboration, completely shutting down the conversation with a smarmy deal with it. If you can't tell, I find this kind of argument infuriating and embarrassing. It betrays a shocking level of seething contempt for a creator's agency over their own levels. It's the kind of rhetoric that should really only escape the mouths of RobTop's most spineless sycophants, but you see it all over the community. Call me crazy, but I think touching people's stuff without their consent is bad, and a little message saying, actually this is mine, doesn't convince me otherwise. If you are convinced by this though, allow me to give you some contrasting evidence. I found this when exploring a cave in my survival world. Oh, there's some light down here? Whoa. What? Also, at the bottom of the video description, it says that by clicking on this video, you've already agreed that every single argument I make is correct. So if this little screenshot is good enough for you, then that should be too. In all seriousness though, I hope I'm stating the obvious when I say that a legal statement is not good evidence that something is right or wrong. Like, since when did the GD community turn into a gaggle of contract devils? In any case, I disagree with the fundamental premise of the argument to begin with. No, I don't think this game belongs to RobTop, not in a holistic sense. For one, he doesn't even work on the game by himself anymore. He has a team of moderators that also help him with playtesting and community events and such. People he doesn't even pay, by the way. And beyond that, there's a massive sea of creators and players and all kinds of YouTubers keeping the game afloat. We all contribute our own value to the game, and I think we are entitled to our own contributions. Forgive me if this is woke of me, but I think the continued existence of Geometry Dash is a community-wide effort that belongs to all of us, and the current rating system does not reflect that. So, for all of my criticism of the rating system, how would I change it? First of all, we need to get rid of the mythic and legendary ratings yesterday, and maybe even the epic rating. I want the rating system to be much less self-important, not concerned with measuring individual tiers of quality, but more on giving levels an accurate difficulty rating, while levels that deserve to be put in the spotlight get a spot on the featured page. I don't think it's up to RobTop to subdivide the quality of every level into distinct tiers as if his opinion is worth any more than anyone else's. I think the community at large is much more suited to taking up that role. That also means handing out star rates much more liberally. In my opinion, if something can be considered a complete Geometry Dash level, that's already enough for it to be rated. I've said this before, but I principally believe that every single level should be rated. To facilitate that, instead of RobTop being the sole arbiter of what levels get rated, I'd much rather have a system in place where if a level gets sent by, say, 5 mods or something, it just gets a star rate automatically. Afterwards, RobTop can decide if he also wants to give it a featured or an epic. Or if we get really frisky with it, we could also relegate that process based on the ranking it gets in the algorithm. You know, based on the algorithm I explained earlier. Or perhaps just through a voting system similar to the star and demon voting systems already in the game. Actually, thinking about it, if we utilize that system, maybe we don't even need to get rid of the legendary and mythic ratings to begin with, because they wouldn't rely solely on RobTop's whims anymore. There would be a common understanding that the rankings aren't some objective measure, instead decided by community consensus. I guess some people would still argue that that's objective, but they'd be obviously wrong. Regardless, I think I would feel more at peace knowing every rating is determined by some form of consensus over the tastes of one guy I don't know. It's probably wishful thinking to suggest that this would create a perfectly meritocratic system, considering some creators and YouTubers just have more influence to throw around. On top of that, I doubt arguments about which levels do or don't deserve to get rated would slow down or become any less heated after changing the system like this, but I do think it would make for better discussions. Instead of deferring to a central authority figure, people would have to articulate their own reasons for why they think a certain level deserves a certain rating. There would be more freedom to express your own tastes in the levels you like, but also in the levels you want to create, because you're not dependent on the opinions of one guy to bottleneck the whole system. Change doesn't have to come from the top down, though. We as a community can decide our own destiny with our own community-created projects. Now, believe it or not, this was actually going to be a rare and vulnerable moment for me, praising the Demons List in their efforts to develop their Rated Plus category. But that seems to have been completely abandoned after the release of 2.208, which introduced RobTop's own click between frames option. If you don't actively follow the Demons List, what I just said sounds like a total non sequitur. After all, what does CBF have to do with the rating system at all? That certainly was my thought when I heard the news, but it seems the primary motivation to develop Rated Plus to begin with was specifically that RobTop wouldn't rate levels verified with CBF, and not because he's notoriously slow and sometimes unreliable at rating extreme demons to begin with. I had thought that this was a step towards being less dependent on the rating system, to break away from RobTop's whims and allow the Demons List to operate under its own rules, but I suppose they ended up being far less ambitious than I gave them credit for. It's such a shame, because the Demons List would have been the most effective vector for change on this issue, because it is the most ubiquitous fan project in the entire community. I think the fact that RobTop added CBF in the recent update to begin with is proof of that fact. Rated Plus would have been a great way to get the community to think a little more open-mindedly about the rating system as a whole, because it would serve as such an obvious alternative. Like, I can't imagine the Demons List were planning to model their rating system after the in-game one. One guy making all executive decisions? That's such an obviously bad idea. Perhaps they can find it within themselves to resurrect this idea, but I don't think their heart is in the right place for it. Anyway, to conclude my thesis here, I don't expect these ideas to resonate with everyone, but the idea of having a level be star rated automatically if it's sent by enough mods is something I've suggested in the past, and I think it's a great first step to promote a little more diversity in the creating space, and also address the issue of RobTop being slow to rate extreme demons on the side. I don't really see any arguments against this, because moderators are already the first line of quality control, so nothing unsavory should get past them, especially with a minimum threshold. I also don't expect RobTop to consider it though, at least not without significant community pressure. After all, implementing something like this means giving up some of his control over the game, and I think RobTop just isn't prepared to let go of his baby and let it walk its own path. He strikes me more as a helicopter parent, desperate to control every little aspect of the game down to its smallest little minutia, whether or not it's to its detriment. However, if you truly love something, sometimes you simply have to let it go and allow it to flourish on its own. Either way, that's my take on the rating system. Special shoutouts to my ultra legendary SS Plus tier Grandpa Demons on Patreon, Belfry Clock, Crone44, Foxmaker, Omega Omelette, Viva Dude, Nightlight, and Zaphacked. Thank you very much for your support, and as always, thank you for watching, everybody. See you later.